Blessed love and peace. We're doing a wee bit of further reasoning on the recent joint we share. I'll give some context for the moment. Experience at hand. In Another Time, Sade is the track just listening to. So pronounced it must be provided inadvertently, albeit hands washing in the middle of laundry. What and so sharing this additional I'm so macho and chauvinistic and such. A sadity chauvinism, perhaps. Either way. Straight up. As I adjust my jewelry. Additional reasoning, explanation, rationale regarding recent proclamations, specifically pertaining to Sistren, dear, beautiful, holy Sistren. And I'm not, it's not a cleaning it up, it's not a retraction, it's simply further explanation and reasoning. No apologies being made here, at least at the moment. It's tough, it's difficult, which is why I'm sharing this further rationale. In English, it's still expensive. What is required is land for mixed heritage kutuhaun. That being said, here's further reasoning rationale. Basically, what it said earlier is essentially equating a university co-ed, a woman, a sistren, even teenagers attending university, and equating that with a call girl, a high-end prostitute. That's nasty. That's actuality today. Why? How we can say that? So first of all, recognize why is it such a harsh kind of awakening or actualization, and seemingly so disrespectful. And additionally, it's shared with painful honesty and love. Vast many people I know are university educated, myself included, family included, and further. I'm speaking about all of this. I'm speaking about the conditions. It's not easy, but it's necessary. So first, recognizing why is it so difficult. So let's just say, let's utilize the age frame of 17 years old. Because obviously 18 years old is like the legal thing, and that, as I mentioned before, brings in a whole additional implication. So to keep this comparatively simple or simpler, with all things being the same, just to compare a 17-year-old who is a university student, freshman university student, and a 17-year-old sistren who's doing OnlyFans, or who's doing webcams, or selling videos to other platforms or whatever else, and making money from that, and how those two can be perceived as equal. How could that be? How dare I be so blasphemous? Exactly. First of all, let's look at some of the exact same similarities. Even the exact sameness. Again, and actually, how much are the two actually the same ones? Sistren at university doing OnlyFans, and additionally, particularly to pay for tuition, and additionally. So first of all, recognize, again, young, same age, 17 years old, before legal status in most countries, or in most Western countries or whatever, but still very statistically sexually active, even by certain standards, even promiscuous, even if not having actual sexual intercourse, still having some type of sexual activity. And getting enveloped in that thing. And I'm not speaking from some angelic perfection experience or proclamation, just communicating what the actualities are. So that's for university, sistren university, and it's for the call girls, obviously. Wearing the same clothes, and additionally presenting oneself in the same way, presenting women's selves in the same way. And we're talking about a specific type of call girl that is commensurate with what I'm describing. So we can talk about the spectrums and the variations of the different populations accordingly. However, we're specifically addressing this kind of aesthetic. So wearing the same clothes can even be from the same socioeconomic background. That's a little bit such as comparatively irrelevant. We're talking about behavior. The significant point here is this. That's a similarity. Let's look at the differentials. The university student is studying, getting a degree, perhaps further gainful employment, not a guarantee, but part of that on that track of the socioeconomic hierarchy and apartheid. That may be different, and well, let's just say categorically speaking, that's different than the sister who's on the call girl route, who's not probably going to get education in terms of advanced degrees or even undergraduate degrees, and is on a different track in terms of socioeconomics. But again, behaviorally, that's comparatively nil. The distinction is comparatively nil. The challenge, this is where the challenge is that we observe, is that amongst the sistren who are university educated, who are going through the process of university education, there is a severe presumption of superiority because of that differentiation, because of the prospects, because of the network, and because of the obligation of privilege, of even just buying into that notion of superiority. So therein is where the equaling factor comes in, because whilst a sister who's a call girl, whether it's OnlyFans or whatever, a comparatively soft core, whatever, even actually having sex with other men, she's doing it as basically a quid pro quo, meaning like there's no pretenses. It's just straight up. This is how much it costs. There it is, a transaction. It's prostitution. Whereas with the co-ed, there are a whole lot of pretenses, which means that she guides her sexual activity in an increasingly strategic way of getting in with certain groups, certain cliques, certain circles, certain networks, certain companies, certain clubs, certain societies, certain employment opportunities and prospects. And so it may not be as many, it may be actually further. How many virgins are actually at university? How many virgins graduate from university? Who are the people that virgins first have sex with? If a virgin, well, if the majority of women who go to university by age 17, 18 years old are already sexually active, already had sexual intercourse, there's that right there, and that speaks for itself. If sisters are virgins when arriving at university, then how is that, and not virgins when leaving university by and large? What's happening with that? Is it through having a boyfriend? Is it through marriage? Is it through interaction with professors, favors, and additionally, is it through hookups brokered by professors? There's a sex trade that's intrinsic within the ivory towers, and it's pervasive. It's part of the propaganda and selling points of universities, particularly amongst the men. But the women looking at marital prospects and it along those lines. But that's very much a significant factor within the university experience, and I'm speaking from first-hand experience, as testimony. That's a significant thing. So whether a woman is at 17 years old is sexually active at the university, she's getting drunk and having sex with lots of dudes, or she's getting drunk and having sex with one dude, not being married, and he's having sex with other women or whatever, and not committed to her and leaves her at some point during that process. I'm speaking from personal experience. I'm testifying against myself. She's still sexually active, and so there's less distinction between that activity, sexual activity, and the sexual activity of a call girl who might actually still be a virgin. She might just do exhibitionism or whatever else. But the fact that she's doing it for money, in addition, I'm not excusing that. It's not acceptable. But what's being drawn out, what is being shown, is the corruption amongst the sisterhood at university, because that's the nature of university. And so the sexual activity is just one thing. In addition to that, and what makes it even the level of corruption even higher, is because the jobs, the monies, it's all. I don't know if I can overstate that, to be honest, until it's just gone. It seems like played out, but at the same time, it's still very much relevant. It's like, it's not hyperbole, and it's not only relevant, it's necessary. But the United States is a pirate ship. It's all about take. That's the foundation. That's what it is. It's not about liberty. It's not about freedom. Obviously, it owns slaves. It's not about fairness. It's not about honesty. It's not about loyalty. It's not about family. It's not about any of that. Those are all just pimp talk. It's about take, plain and simple. From the even before the beginning, way before the U.S. Constitution, it's all about take. That's all it is. And all the U.S. Constitution is rules of the game amongst the biggest takers at that moment. That's all that is. All the rights and everything else like that is game. So, at this moment, the ivory towers are the academia, universities, colleges and universities, are a significant entity, a significant component of that machinery. It's the recruitment tool. It's the way of the division between the haves and have-nots. Who's going to play the game? Who's going to play our game? And who's not? And then there's levels. There's always that you can get the game even nicer. You can upgrade. You can upgrade. You can upgrade. So there's always that thing on. Oh, wait a minute! You haven't paid your dues. You haven't paid your dues. Sorry, service discontinued. So there's always that thing. But that's the ivory towers is basically that threshold between the haves and have-nots. And because of that, the haves, and to be honest, what the haves have is actually disease. But it takes some stillness and honesty to see that. The point here is that it's all corruption. It's based upon take. And those who have just have greater, what they call that, the spoils. Kinfolk have the greater spoils. Kinfolk have the greater, how do I put this? The way the money is gained is through blood and dirt and blood, and predominantly blood with a lot of threatening of blood. That's it. All the business, all the endeavors, from mining to telecommunications, across the board, it's all built on taking, and that taking, the process of that taking is done through murder, it's done through violence, it's done through threatening, extortion, raping, and otherwise. It's all taking. And the people who have the most at this moment in terms of materiality in the United States and across the world are those who have done the most taking, plain and simple. And the universities are the threshold of who is allowed and who's like ascending within that realm of taking. So point is that the sistren who are in that, who are doing that, who are getting the degrees and getting the credentials and qualifications, are doing that in the realm of corruption, are getting immersed in that realm of corruption, and are being utilized and essentially pimped. It's genuine. It's necessary to acknowledge this. It's nasty. And I don't mean to make light of it. I don't mean to be disrespectful. This is necessary to recognize this. The sistren are being pimped at university. When the special groups and cultural groups and everything are having the socials, are having the invitations, it's not even secret societies. It's across the board. It is a very sophisticated, nuanced court, meaning like a king's court of the nobles meeting each other and courting each other. That's what it is. That's what university is at this moment. That it is the Platonic court, the Republic court, the democracy court of nobility. That's what it is. So it's arrangements of marriage. That would be the ideal scenario. But in the meantime, amidst no rules barred co-ed dormitories, unisex bathrooms, and additionally, it's a sex fest. How do I know? Who's asking? It's a sex fest. And in that sex fest, women are being prostituted. It's very elite. It's a members only type of situation. Kinfolk can chirp all they want about facts and truth, but that's the facts. Where's the proof? Open your eyes. Be honest. Or shut the fuck up and see what happens. Literally, shut the fuck up. Make adultery, make promiscuity illegal, and anybody who has sex outside of marriage, make that a felony. Shut the fuck up and see what happens. Serious. There's your evidence. The fact that it's not speaks for itself. And anybody else who denies it or questions it is pimp talking. And shut the fuck up. Chirp, chirp. You can hate me all you like. Facts is facts. I don't do this for my health, per se. Actually, I'm not going to play with that. Yes and no on that one. I don't do it for fun. Definitely that. I don't do it for popularity either. At least not on this earth. So, beyond this earth is not a popularity contest anyway. So, anyway, like I said, I'm a piece of shit. I walk with God. I'm no better or worse than anybody else. I'm speaking facts. And for it is what it is. All right. So, it's a sex fest. And sisters are very discouraged. In this pimp talk about being empowered, empowerment is imperialism. Empowerment is imperialism, plain and simple. And it's a twisted recruitment, and it's conditioned way before university. It's conditioned at early stages. Parents condition children to walk in these tropes. When allowing children, girls, to wear very revealing things at early ages, participate in different type of activities that are just, I mean, children have to be taught to have sex, and children have to be taught how not to have sex. And so that's all part of the conditioning. It's all part of like raising and growing kinfolk, children into adults to be part of society. It's just such that at the moment, the way industrialized, post-industrialized, post-democratic, post-cosmopolitan society is that promiscuity is pervasive, and the way that children are conditioned generally, regularly, mainstream-wise, is almost anything goes. Almost anything goes. And so in that, young sistren are discouraged into being promiscuous in order not just to get attention and a prospective mate, but to function within society. And without having a mate, particularly at age 16, 17 years old, have to deal with that balancing beam of either getting married and being supported by a husband, or having to continue to play the game and essentially pimp herself. It doesn't have to be every night. It could be once a year, but it's still, she's employed by somebody else who doesn't actually value her for the work. She's valued essentially predominantly by her ability to recruit interest from other brethren. She might have knowledge about this, and she might have this and the other. And if you believe that in terms of like the basis of her employment, additionally, you are drinking heavy amounts of the Kool-Aid. Blot out. It's sex. That's it. And it's exploitation. And it's sex exploitation that is so smooth talked. People aren't even like recognizing, don't believe it, want to defend it, and want to excuse and make all different types of explanations. It's sexual exploitation. And that's why it's recognized as the same as a call girl, who's just doing essentially the same thing without the pretenses. And for kinfolk like myself, people can accuse us of being all types of sexually deviant ourselves for whatever histories and whatever continuing practices are done. All that being said and addressed, we walk a path that is considerably ethical. It's not greater than or less than anybody else, but it is a discipline that is very strict and also considerably vulnerable to the predatoriness within society, and thus anyone who is unacclimated to this discipline, it requires acclimation. Part of the difficulty that Sistren have who are in the elite component of the apartheid, it means letting a lot of that go. And people have attached the value of self, their own personal value, how much they love themselves and believe in themselves and like themselves, based upon acceptance and belonging within the elite groups or the elite culture. And the prospect of being without that acceptance within the elite culture is almost equivalent to death. It's unfathomable, because so much of one's sense of self is dependent upon being accepted in those club experiences. And so this walk is one that lets go of those things. It's an ancient walk, but it lets go of those things. And that's one of the reasons why it's very difficult, even when Sistren intellectually, emotionally, socially, even ethically, culturally, and all these other different ways vibe with what we share. It's difficult to progress it beyond for Sistren and even brethren as well, when brethren are that walk in terms of just the spiritual experience. But it's difficult for kinfolk in the elitist sphere to progress that type of vibration of one love, even, and ethics and righteousness and peace and unity and honesty and compassion and modesty. It's difficult to progress it beyond just the holiday experience or just the vacation experience or the side part-time experience, because that means letting go of the credentials, the degrees, the bank accounts, and all those other things. And that sounds cultish. The United States is a cult. It's a very, very heavily populated cult. But when you get to the hierarchies, the echelons, then you better see the concerns about that type of accusation of occultism. Anyways, would it help to provide examples? Would it help to provide details? Yes and no. Providing details and specifics avails ourselves to further clap back from specific groups. If people need to find those examples and details, it's readily available on basic searches, presumably, depending upon what the algorithm censorship is. But it's a lot of it is common knowledge, at least in our common experience. And it would make these much longer too. Perhaps maybe after a few it would evolve into something else. All that being said, the basic thing is, like, if cats can't see that for what we say and need like the physical or the actual proof, the tangible proof of examples of what we're talking about in terms of occultism and otherwise, then that's fine. But it's unnecessary. Cats ain't ready for it. That's fine. We cultivate in this respect, talking in this way, particularly in a criticism type manner. We speak in a way that has certain generality, but at the same time, with the generality, there is a general honesty and truthfulness. So the articulations are phrased in such a way that it's careful. This is like training for 3 years of formal education, as well as practice and painful awkwardness of articulation. But the way we speak is in such a way that it's generally thoroughly honest, even amidst the generality. Sometimes when we're called out, we can talk about the specifics on hand. Sometimes we abstain from talking about specifics intentionally for a number of different reasons. But that's a side note. Continuing on to the topic at hand with the Sistren. So again, it's a matter of recognizing the corruption. It's just like, what's that, woodpecker? I know that's all we got. That's all the rice. That's all we got for the moment. Ain't cooking nothing right now. I know it's been out there all day. I know it didn't come through a week ago. I know. I was tripping on that one. I did provide some bread though. It was some nice bread. Did you get some of that? I know what I said before a week ago. And I know I flaked out on that one. That's my bad. So perhaps you will enjoy. All right, see you later. Perhaps you appreciate the rice, even though it is a little bit left over from earlier today. Appreciate you stopping by. Thank you for visiting. That's the kinfolk woodpecker right there. So the cistern. It's just a matter of recognizing the corruption within the university, and I say this, and then the next day I go to the university, and there's a presumption that some kinfolk see this, some kinfolk don't. I can't. It's difficult to say for certain. There's all different levels of types of hacking and access, and I mean it's posted on YouTube, but it's difficult to say. My point is, like, I say these things, and they seem harsh. They may seem harsh. They're not intended as harsh. They're not intended even as hostile. It can come from some experience of frustration. Try to keep it modulated. But the point is, it can seem very harsh. And then the next day, I walk by and I say hi to people, and that might seem fake as fuck. Like, this dude is talking about all this criticism and apartheid and corruption and prostitution, and now he's going to talk about hi. I say hi to everybody, and I love everybody. I don't agree with everybody, and there is corruption. It's pervasive. It's intentional, particularly from the hierarchies, and we're just being honest about that. And it's not condemning. It's just acknowledging it and speaking for what it is, because part of the quietness of avoiding it, and additionally, is intended just to continue it happening. So we speak particularly with that intention. We can do it in the street and speak directly to kinfolk. We try to make it as little imposition as least impositional as possible. We're not trying to beat people over the head with it. We are not trying to beat people over the head with it, but at the same time, we're utilizing what means we have, generally speaking, to provide some communication, balancing communication of truth amidst the pervasive corruption around. So also, we do it in a way where if people don't fancy it, then they can continue on watching, doing something else. If kinfolk vibe with it, then they can look at it on the low, download it incognito or whatever else, as much as we know about those details, and then proceed accordingly. So it's not a matter about hiding or being two-faced or whatever else. We're very willing to have this conversation with kinfolk. We're not trying to be disrespectful, and if kinfolk accuse us of being disrespectful, holla, let us know, and we'll also let you know how we think you're disrespectful in being a citizen and pretending like nothing is happening. And we're going to challenge things on that, because we don't do that ourselves, and we pay a high price for that, as you can already see if you watch the videos. So, like, we call out that quiet duplicity that's just presumed within the norm of society. It's very difficult for people to acknowledge and accept, but it's actuality. And if it's like uncomfortable, or whatever, whose fault is that? Ultimately, we're not trying to flex or whatever, but that's part of the situation, and that's what applies to the university education, and that's why there's an equating of call girl and the co-ed, because the call girl is doing things we disagree with, but it's readily acknowledged. Like, you don't have to say too much about prostitution, about that being wrong or looked down upon or whatever else. That's already acknowledged. The thing about it, though, is that whilst that is admonished, we don't agree with that. At the same time, we recognize, sistren who are co-eds are doing the same type of activity in terms of sexual promiscuity. Again, they're varying degrees, but still having sex outside of marriage, plain and simple. Attaining or retaining economic benefits through a very sophisticated, nuanced culture or methodology of quid pro quo. Still, it's for that purpose. And in addition to that, have a very generally speaking, even just to stay in the game, in the Ivory Towers, no jokes. To stay in that environment, it requires having some type of elitist and superior sense of self, of the private or the exclusive club, and that's where the corruption becomes further compounded and pronounced, and that's what we're speaking to. Because at the same time, the call girl very often has much further availability to call out injustice, to call out bullshit, literally, quoting. And because of that, is further motivated, further accessible, further inclined to take that step where we are in terms of letting go of these trappings. So that's what we're speaking of, and that's why I talk about the prospect of marrying a prostitute and equating a call girl with a prostitute in terms of the ethics, the levels of honesty and levels of corruption. That's what we were talking about from the beginning. The points of equating, particularly specifically pertaining to corruption and honesty. And when we see beautiful sister walking with parents, and like just beginning studies and doing earnestly, and people might say, hey, you're talking about such and such, you're talking about my daughter, you're talking about my sister, you're talking about my cousin. Yes, we are. And we don't do it lightly, and we don't do it with the intention of being disrespectful. We are calling out the injustices. We are calling out the corruption and how pervasive it is and how prominent it is on the university campus, categorically, private, public, parochial, and otherwise. Academia as an institution is the front lines, the barrier of apartheid, and the level of corruption is severe on the other side. On the elitist side of that boundary, and at the university, either there's, at the very minimum, there's already a buy-in into that sphere of corruption to be at the university and accept enrollment, even a full scholarship, tuition, still just by enrolling and participating, it's buying into that realm of corruption. But even further, the further one wants to ascend or endeavors to ascend within the hierarchies, it's ascending within that corruption. And that's what we're calling out. And it's not a condemnation towards anybody. It's just recognizing what the actuality, what the facts are. And particularly for sistren, who are daughters and sisters and cousins, to be able to make knowledgeable decisions, honest decisions, fair and just decisions for the rest of life. And like, it can be unfathomable, like life without a university degree. I can't speak on that because I've been given one, so to speak. I've let it go, but still, it's easier said than done. So I can't. I'm soliciting kinfolk essentially to do something I didn't do myself. I can't undo it. But I've learned in that process, particularly at this moment, there may be a time, even within the next generation, where enough honesty and integrity is restored into a formal institution and process of higher education, such that the credentials of a degree are less of an indictment than it is at this moment. However, at this moment, it is what it is, and it's beneficial for kinfolk to acknowledge it and make decisions accordingly, because the decisions that are made at this moment guide the path of life from this point. What people let go of in exchange for access and elitism and exclusivity are some of the most precious experiences and phenomena of life in terms of relationship, family and friends, knowledge of one's own heritage and ancestry, honesty, sobriety, integrity of chastity, and further. These are things that many kinfolk are extremely discouraged into exchanging in order to have access. Might have been never had anything to drink, never had anything, did no drugs before entering university, but in order to get invited to the parties, get invited to the clubs, and additionally it's going to happy hour and do what everybody else does. Corruption. And that's for each facet: sex, drugs, dishonesty, starting to have that develop that rapport. And a lot of this is done before university. Like university is kind of like the next stepping stone. People have already been acculturated to this kind of scene already as part of the prerequisite to entry into university. Particularly elite universities already have to have that repertoire and that vernacular and the credentials to get into the university, the exclusive universities. So high school and middle school is like the socializing, the indoctrination zone. So university is just a compounded version of that. There's all right. The day is setting. The smile is concluding for this moment. So it's beneficial to be mindful of that, respectful of that, and attentive, and wrap this joint up. It's been a half hour already. We already did some early recordings, but that was basically to give some further rationale. But it's just basically recognizing the corruption that exists within academia, and so much so that the typical co-ed at a university is equatable to a typical call girl on high-end pornography online. Am I speaking with bias? Am I speaking to try to cover up my tracks? And otherwise, I'm speaking with bias. I'm not speaking to try to cover up my tracks. Am I speaking to try to like justify or rationalize what I'm doing? I'm looking at conditions and figuring out why I do what I do amidst the conditions, and in that process sharing the notes, recognizing that there are many who are afflicted with similar challenges. So, and honesty is helpful in the aggregate experience of relationship. And so that's what we're doing, and we welcome respectful reasoning in response. We walk a trod in this life that is tenacious. It's actually also isolating. And again, it's well documented through the ages. It's an ancient trod. And we build from the notes of the preceding journeyers. Brethren and sistren who go before us and who share the notes, share the guidance, share the lessons, what kinfolk learn. And we do our best. And what the kinfolk teach us, our ancestors, prophets, and sages, is that those who choose this walk, those who proceed in this walk, it is isolating. It is difficult to be in relationship with kinfolk for numerous reasons, and particularly to live a conventional lifestyle, because conventional leadership and hierarchy is based upon corruption and favoritism. Plain and simple, whether you call it democracy, whether you call it monarchy, feudalism, dictatorship, or whatever. All around the world, same song. So, meanwhile, even amidst this, we are commanded, we are guided, we are obligated to be married and have children. I'm learning this as I continue in life in terms of the discipline and ethics and further. So it's different when kinfolk are raised from birth to adulthood in the walk, because it's easier to be in a relationship with those who are also the parents introduce children to the culture, and the parents introduce the children to other practitioners, so that relationship is easier cultivated, generally speaking. When a child grows into an adult and learns this culture, this discipline, this deen on one's own, or as an adult, the tasks become compounded, because it's learning the culture, which in and of itself takes years, even a lifetime to learn, and particularly as an adult, it takes a whole lot. But that's one thing. But then, in addition to that, then being functional in terms of economics and supporting oneself, knowing how to provide this basic sustenance of food, clothing, and shelter, that's a whole nother task, in addition to studying and learning. And then being in a relationship, like there's a whole lot of things going on, taking care of house, cleaning. A lot of these each are full-time jobs, keeping house and cleaning, going out and getting the food, going out and doing the diplomacy and economics, doing the studies. each of those is a full-time job. So anyway, oh, woe is me. Am I getting to a pity party now? What was I talking about? Am I biased? Am I hiding my tracks? I am biased. I'm not hiding the tracks. We invite reasoning. We invite respectful reasoning. Particularly where kinfolk genuinely consider, a lot of people just make just bullshit accusations and all different types of stuff as a way of blowing smoke and everything else like that. And we don't have a lot of patience for that, particularly at this moment. But yo, we're not perfect. If you see something we doing that's questionable, that's suspect, that's flat out wrong, holler respectfully, because we're not going to hear you if you don't be respectful. And I don't mean that like just like, oh, we ain't gonna listen. We will not hear you. Nobody hears somebody else when they're being disrespectful. What they hear is the disrespect, regardless of how much truth it is. So we try to be as respectful as possible. We can see how kinfolk can disagree with us about us being respectful, but if they look at the aggregate and feel the vibration of what we share with our heart and soul, we are as respectful as we can be. And then also look at how we talk about ourselves, to be honest, and how much of that is the culture. And we can't blame it on nobody else. We got to take responsibility ourselves. But anyways, the point is, we're not trying to be disrespectful. That don't mean nothing, because kinfolk can often say that and still be all types of disrespect. We work diligently not to be disrespectful. We work diligently to be honest. Sometimes we can share that honesty and truth in a blunt way that's difficult to see. And when we tell kinfolk, I'm not going to say the specific ethnicity. I've already said it. I'm not hiding behind it. I'm not trying to compound it at the moment. But when in recent weeks we make the proclamation for a certain kinfolk of a certain specific demographic to shut the fuck up, the emphasis is on the citizenship of the United States, and recognizing that, yes, the kinfolk are a particular demographic that experiences woeful atrocities to this day for generations, and that needs to be addressed, that needs to be remedied, that needs to be stopped, that needs to be recompensed, that needs to have reconciliation and restitution. Ain't no doubt about that. But at the same time, they don't give kinfolk an excuse to be all types of belligerents and doing atrocities to others. And that's what we're talking about in terms of shutting the fuck up, because it's the kinfolk who are the most molested and done dirty, but at the same time still holding on to the United States and claiming the United States and promoting the United States. That's what the United States is hanging on by a thread by, which is one of the reasons why we say that specifically, bluntly, and by perhaps some people's accounts as disrespectfully. Don't mean disrespect, but just if we say, yo, that same demographic of kinfolk who are rapists to stop raping, is that disrespect? Shut the fuck up means shut the fuck up. What is fuckery? We can actually look at it's actually, as we understand, it's actually an Old English synonym, which means fornication upon king's consent, which means that a noble who is under the king could have sex outside of marriage based upon getting sanction, pre-approval by the king. That's what fuck, to our understanding, means. Fornication under king's consent, or under the consent of the king. I guess it's going to be accurate in terms of the lettering. So that's what fuck means. Fornication under the consent of the king. And so, again, it's very beneficial to shut the fuck up. Now, if we know it's a vernacular, that means just shut up, and it's disrespectful. But at the same time, we speak literally in these respects. And particularly to citizens who are involved in all types of mega fuckery, like huge amounts, multitudes and levels of fuckery, whether it's fornication, rape, sexual deviance, and then even further outside the realm of sexual copulation to drugs and stealing and violence. And additionally, that is all being done by the United States at this very moment. And when it's being done by the United States, it's being done by the citizens of the United States. And so, again, regardless if the kinfolk, whatever color they are, whatever ethnicity, whatever religion, Orthodox, Reform, secular, atheist, or whatever else. Every citizen is doing the dirt that the United States is doing. All the violence, all the bloodshed that the United States is doing, every citizen is doing at this moment. And particularly those citizens, again, that have further credibility in the world's view, who've been the victim of the United States directly and continually, have further credibility in keeping the United States going and become the biggest perpetrators of the atrocities of the United States, because the world gives no credence to other types of demographic in America. And without the afflicted element within the United States, America would not even be talked about at this moment. This would be indigenous land with United Nations enclaves here and there, if it weren't for the lowly, quote unquote, within the United States, who've been the perennial victims of the United States. If it weren't for the fact those kinfolk are still holding so much onto the United States and have some kind of some Stockholm syndrome loyalty, it just prolongs the process. And we're not wishing for anything, we're not wanting, we're not advocating, we're just communicating. We're advocating for healing. We're advocating for well-being. And we have little expectation of that happening voluntarily within the United States. We don't see Nineveh in the United States. We actually see hyper deterioration, to be honest. And I mean, it's already dissolving, it's already deteriorating, but in terms of the prospect of recuperation or otherwise, as an entity, as a United States entity, that's difficult to see. So meanwhile, we share the information, and when it's perceived as disrespectful, we welcome kinfolk to respectfully call us out on it, rather than rolling up on us with vehicles and hiding faces. And additionally, we invite kinfolk to utilize their words, and we have listening ear. To be honest, at this point, we have less patience for bullshit, just because we are dealing with these conditions, and we can't tell one cat from another too easy. We don't know what kinfolk are on, and we know that they're kinfolk who are everything we share. The kinfolk are yo, we with you, quiet as cat. We know that, but it's still difficult to discern one cat from another, because the game is smooth, and cats can play their masks, and cats. There are cats who's just all types of not even hostility, just all types of get overness, meaning whatever opportunity they can to take advantage of a situation. They don't give a fuck about politics or ethics or anything else. They just say, yo, they running game, they gotta hustle. And if they see some opportunity of cashing in on something or whatever, so we got all types, and so we have to be mindful of that. So it's tough, but this is life. We give all thanks and praise to the Most High. There's a purpose for everything. We got that equilibrium and the harmony, cultivating a stillness to be able to observe the phenomena, the conditions, the movement around us. And then when we are called upon to rejoin the movement, partake of the nourishment, share the healing, to do that in an optimally balanced and optimally harmonious way. So that's it. How can I talk in that way of a spiritualist, and then talk about prostitution? Again, we just invite the consideration of just recognizing the honesty of what societal conditions are, not even what the societal conditions are, but what the laws are, and what the pressures are, what the discouragements are against healthy relationship, against a man and a woman being married. How obstructive the laws are, how obstructive the economics are, how obstructive the social environment is towards healthy relationship. How draconian the lines are drawn in terms of marriage, in terms of age, in terms of uh, pornography, prostitution, and additionally, what I mean by that, there are terms that are utilized that create a binary, and when something is identified on one side of the binary, there's like this perceived like just huge like chasm that's very much fabricated. It is it's an abstract construction. It's like it's an imagination. The severity of that chasm. For example, if we say something is a legal interaction between a woman and man in terms of sexual interaction, and then something is prostitution, there's that line between mutually consensual non-prostitution and then prostitution. But and that's very, it's laws, it's lockup, it's jail, it's fines and penalties, it's stigmatization when it's crossed that line. So it's a huge prostitution. But if you look at like the actualities, if a man takes a woman out to a nice restaurant, they have sex, just met that day, one night stand or whatever else, don't talk to her for the rest of life, was that not just prostitution? He didn't pay her anything money-wise, but gave her gifts, jewelry, expensive meal. Now she has a story to tell, a credential or whatever else. But basically, he gave money for that evening. And their sex. So if it's mutually consensual, then whatever. But but when it's considered prostitution, what up? Same scenario of a young brethren at a university meets a young sister. They hook up for that night. Friends with benefits. He doesn't even pay her anything. But what he does is he pays for tuition. If we look at it as a brothel, a membership brothel, he has live-in accommodations. His roommates are women, lives in the dorm. It's easy access. He doesn't pay anything to the women. So it's not prostitution per se, but he pays to get into that room. He pays to sleep in that room, and when he does that, it's only a matter of like nature before him walking around in his drawers and his sister walking around with their bra and panties. Oh, come in and stay over in my room. Let's talk. Let's have some food. Oh yeah, and all of a sudden, blah da, and blah da, and blah da, and blah da. Until he's spent, and the sister get the energy that he shares, knowledge, or whatever else, as long as they're able to keep some semblance of a nice name and whatever, not being considered too promiscuous. But that's not prostitution because he didn't pay him, but at the same time, is that much different? Anyways, that's what I'm talking about in terms of lines. That's prostitution. Again, we'll talk about age, who's legal, who's not legal to have sex. 18 hard fast, except for maybe 100 years ago it was 16, or maybe 50 years ago it was 21. And then on what basis is this decided? What is the critical factor of like what happens at the age of 18 that all of a sudden a person is ready to have sex at that moment? What is that? What's the rationale? What explains that? Is it just easy and simple for middle-aged men to do that and enforce laws otherwise? And then what happens when it's a 16-year-old and a 16-year-old? It's not statutory rape because he's not over the age of 18, but at the same time, or maybe it is statutory, but it's different because he's a minor too. All these nuances because it's evidence of the contrived. That's what we're looking for before. The contrivedness, the contrivance of these laws. And the significant chasm because, it's under minor, call that jailbait. A man who's 18 has sex with a 16-year-old, a 17-year-old. And we're not advocating that. We advocate sex in marriage only. That's what we proclaim. We're talking about conditions and how the conditions, the laws or the rules, the conventional, the earthly laws are contrived and manipulated. We're not suggesting that the laws are like initially established for the purpose of manipulation. However, the laws are established in a comparatively arbitrary or indiscriminate way that avails itself to significant manipulation, and that manipulation becomes increasingly severe as the corruption within society becomes increasingly severe, and then the adjustments happen, like fornication under king's consent or the consent of the king, and additionally all these small writings, fine prints, addendums and addenda and caveats and all these other things. The law gets complex, like Lao Tzu teaches. The further complex the laws are, the further thieves abound. And so that's the same thing with the relations, the laws governing relationship, marriage and non-marriage. People talk about the purpose of the formality of marriage in a secular sense, pertaining to rights of cohabitation, rights of taxation, rights of income and property ownership, arrangements concerning insurance, employability, and otherwise. But those are predominantly economic factors rather than relational factors that are conducive towards the healthy life and interaction and relationship between a man and a woman. And so when the barriers or when the requirements for that recognition are such, it is discouraging for kinfolk to make that, because it becomes an economic decision rather than a relational decision. And without that, there's the eventuality of sexual intercourse and promiscuity that is comparatively indifferent and devaluing of the institution and the commitment of marriage. And that's what we observe in society at this moment. So all the lines that are drawn and all the stances that are made accordingly are rather contrived. And it's necessary to have lines. It's necessary to have a limit on age, and a valid limit. It's wrong for adults to have sex with children. It's wrong. Plain and simple. It's an atrocity. It's one of the worst atrocities. Rape is one of the worst atrocities in life, arguably further than murder. No one can say from experience. However, within proximity, rape is one of the worst things in this life. Torture, rape, murder. So it is necessary to draw lines, but it's necessary to draw the lines in an honest and legitimate way. We talk about puberty being a deciding factor, obviously, and that's not a universal age bracket per se. People mature at different ages, and that's there's purposefulness within the ambiguity, because a person just walking up and meeting somebody, you don't know, and so you be mindful, and there can be extreme consequences for sexual intercourse, pedophilia, and so plain and simple, you don't know. You can't tell by looking per se. So be careful. It behooves you to meet the parents. It behooves you to speak a while and learn about the person accordingly. But when the rules are contrived based upon a number that's not speaking to an actual experience of differentiation, it lends itself to just pish posh. We don't take that seriously anyways. Even when people do utilize it as a pretense for persecution or whatever, headlines, so-and-so had sex with a 17-year-old, that celebrity movie star, But they actually don't believe too tough in that law itself, because that law is nothingness. Heidi B. We had an hour at this. This is somewhat of an off day, I think, to be honest. We are regrouping and regathering, and it's also the internet day as well, so it lends itself to that type of situation. Prostitution was one line that I was talking about. Age was another line I was talking about. In terms of current earthly laws pertaining to these types of things, marriage is another one. They're all different categories of marriage. Common law. Budi bada. An hour at this officially. Lights out. Dance, dance, dance. But like I said, marriage is another example. If people don't go to the justice of the peace or the court, the judge or whatever else and get a paper, then not qualified as being married, unless whatever the common law is within a particular state, whether just cohabitation for a specific period of time, whether it's a minimum of 2 years or 5 years or whatever, then by definition, people, the man and woman, can be considered as common law husband and wife. But then there's the prohibition, categorical prohibition in many states, I think even in the nation of Canada, of polygamy, outlaw of a man having further than one wife, even though it is the legal standard and practice around the world for thousands of years. All of a sudden, somehow, it becomes illegal. And am I speaking with bias? Everything is. You are too. So from where is this derived? Particularly in the advent of separation between church and state. And then if polygamy is illegal, then what about adultery? It's illegal? It's illegal for a man to be married with a woman and then marry another woman with his wife's consent, even pre-communicated consent before he marries his first wife, and he marries a second wife. That in the law, the eyes of the earthly law in many states and provinces, is considered illegal. However, if that same man marries the first woman and then has sex with 50 women during the time of being married with the first wife, perceivably, according to law, that is actually illegal. So the law is favoring the man to be promiscuous and having extramarital affairs because he doesn't have the same prospect of being put in jail compared to if he has another wife. And the purpose for having another wife isn't for him to be like sexually gratified or whatever, have ego. That's not the purpose. But we're not talking about the motivation of a man having multiple wives at the moment. It's a matter of recognizing that it's a thing. It's a legitimate thing for thousands of years across the world. So for any contemporary government today to outlaw that, where is that coming from? On what basis? You can cite Christianity, but right there, that's problematic. So let's leave that. I'm just going to we've already addressed that situation because most people are not Christians anyways, or not, at least not following the teachings of Jesus. So we're not entertaining that rationale at the moment either. Jesus himself is Jewish in Judaism, not even Jewish actually, because Jewish is something that's constructed afterwards. The term J, the letter J, is not in the Hebrew alphabet. Anyways, but if we're looking at Jesus, he's coming from the tradition of Israel. Polygamy is permitted in the tradition of Israel. So that provides little ground for Christians to stand on in terms of outlawing polygamy. And we can talk about the Vatican, we can talk about the Catholic Church, and additionally celibacy, monasticism. For those who have ears to hear, we've talked about that for a long time. Meanwhile, if that's the case, then all of marriage should be outlawed, if that's the case. Anyways, it's not the case because Jesus also says, what God has put together, let not man tear asunder. So the lines, the entrenchments, the imbalance. That's some of what we talked about. So that the third example I was saying about the marriage, drawing the line of marriage, again, there's legitimacy and there's of officially sanctioning marriage, but at the same time doing it in a way that supports the relationship between a husband and wife rather than simply an economic credential to get favorable terms of negotiation when securing mortgage debt and insurance rates and other applications of conventional acceptance. let's call that a wrap. We are going to give all thanks and praise to the Most High for the patience, We communicate blessed love and peace to all our ancestors, prophets, and sages, past and present, known and unknown. Blessed love and peace to His Majesty Haile Selassie and Her Majesty Waisaramani. His Majesty Haile Selassie being a monogamous, devout Christian, also recognizing the legitimacy of pluralism and the necessity of negotiation and cooperation with those who are different from ourselves, patience, sovereignty, honesty, resilience, balance, daily. Blessed love and peace.